Hi everyone, today I am doing a rewatch of the television show Twin Peaks. I have rewatched the whole season now and I'm on to the last episode of season 2, which until recently was going to be the last ever episode. It is episode 29, episode 30 if you count the pilot, and it is the 22nd episode of season 2 and it is called Beyond Life and Death, and it was written by Mark Frost and Harley Payton and Robert Engels and directed by David Lynch. Can't you tell? That is such a sweet opening with Lucy and Andy. They are finally able to collectively think about what the future might hold for them as a family with the baby as well, and what they mean to each other. Outside of this crazy storyline with Dick, any kind of reservations that Lucy might have had about Andy, I think that this scene says it all about Andy's sincerity. Okay, so this first scene we get of Cooper. He is back at the sheriff's station with Harry and Hawk. They are looking at the map again, trying to figure out where Wyndham Earl might have gone. And Cooper seems to be in some sort of all-knowing trance-like state. He starts to figure out the map and the symbols pretty quickly, associating them with things that he has known before. It seems to me like this knowledge he's imbued with has simply come from nowhere. It's like it was either in him all along, or he has been gifted this knowledge by some other source. The log lady arrives, and I think that the way that she communicates to Dale is probably one of the sanest moments that we've seen her in. She is very quietly spoken, and when she refers to her husband and why he had this oil, she is very earnest, she is very serious. I think she understands the gravity of what the oil means and the situation that they are all in. So they bring in Ronette Pulaski and ask her to identify the smell of the oil. And she is able to confirm that the smell reminds her of the night that Laura Palmer was killed, therefore linking in everything together. Wyndham Earl takes Annie to Glastonbury Grove, where the entrance to the Black Lodge is, and Annie starts quoting scripture. She appears to try and be bold and brave, but there are moments in which her fear shines through and she screams a couple of times, and Wyndham says some interesting things as he's leading Annie towards the entrance to the Black Lodge. He initially says that during the time when Caroline was alive, that Wyndham more or less manipulated that situation. Kind of more or less confirms, I guess, that he was aware of his actions the whole time, that he was hurting Coop and hurting Caroline. Then he says this strange line, which is, "I tell you they have not died, their hands clasp yours and mine." And after he says this, Annie goes into a trance-like state. She appears to be in a spotlight, the same kind of spotlight that we saw Bob emerge from. Seems to be being magnetized by some kind of force. She appears to willingly do what Wyndham asks her to do. So you can see that Wyndham actually is leading the way in that, and Annie is following. He does not have to drag her, he does not have to propel her to go into that Black Lodge. She is following him. I don't know if Annie's fear peaked and that's what caused her to go into this trance-like state, or whether it's something else, whether the forces inside the Black Lodge have this effect on Annie, or whether it is something else, such as she is inhabited by some kind of spirit that has come from the Black Lodge and is now taking her back in there. I think that it's important to note that Wyndham still wants Annie to go inside the Black Lodge. He doesn't just want to get in there himself. There is a reason that he wants to take Annie with him. And I guess that's because he wants Cooper to suffer and follow him into the Black Lodge. As the king in the chess game, I guess the only way that Cooper can fall now is if he enters the Black Lodge. Okay, so we get the Nadeem storyline. Mike and Nadine rather comically bandaged in identical bandages, head bandages, after their ordeal at the Miss Twin Peaks contest. I think we knew that this was going to happen, that Nadeem was going to finally snap out of this idea that she was a young girl and remember that she was a grown woman who was married to Ed. And it's kind of sad, I think, this moment. It kind of reminds me of the story of Don Quixote. At the end of that book, Don Quixote, he comes to his senses. He leaves the adventures of being a knight behind him, and yet when he was the knight, that is when the most wonderful things happen to him and the most exciting things happened to him, and he had more influence on people, and he was having an amazing time, and he had stories to tell. At the end of that book, Don Quixote, he sort of proclaims that he has come to his senses and that what he has done is ridiculous. And it's such a sad moment, I think, and that's very similar to this, when Nadine says, "What the hell is going on?" And everything that she was, the super strength Nadine, even though it was ridiculous, it was kind of amazing as well. And her relationship with Mike, I think, was very endearing and sweet, and for that just to be lost as well. And of course for Norma and Ed, it is kind of another tragedy, because they were finally going to get it together, embark on a relationship they had been waiting to reignite, like to like fully commit to after so many years of having to deal with their marriages to other people, their unhappy marriages. And now this moment when Nadine comes to, well, I wouldn't say come to her senses, because I don't think that Nadine, as normal Nadine, is the most is the most clear-thinking woman. She obviously has mental health issues regardless of whether she remembers who she is, because the first thing she says when she remembers her age and her place in the world is, "Where the hell are my drape runners?" I think that whole scene with Nadine, actually, despite all the comedy that we have had with Nadine's character, I think that moment where she cries in Ed's arms really highlights the fact that mental illness is a terrible thing to have to deal with. Okay, so we see this confrontation with Ben Horne and the Haywards, and it's interesting on many levels, this scene. I think Ben's behavior in this scene, I find it amusing that he keeps saying that he wanted to do good, he wanted to be good, he wanted to tell the truth. What he's saying is, I actually wanted to do what everybody who was good in the world wants everybody else to do. And then there is the undertone of, well, look at what's happened. I think he has a bit of a glib way about him when he's talking, whereas everybody else in that scene is like hysterical and crying. And I think it's interesting that Ben's wife turns up as well, because we haven't seen her. She hasn't been present in Audrey's life. She hasn't been involved in Ben's life. Where has she been? And I think that the significance of her being here in this scene is possibly to highlight the difference between the kind of couples they are, whereas Doc Hayward and Eileen are very loving and family orientated, whereas Ben and Sylvia, I mean, where have they been for Audrey? Where have they been for each other? It's really quite disturbing to see Doc Hayward blow up like this and hit Ben, because that's so out of character for him. I think he probably feared that his whole life, that something like this would come out, that this secret would be exposed, and that he would lose the kind of closeness that he has with Donna and the family unit that they have with the other girls. Okay, so Cooper arrives at the Glastonbury Grove, and he tells Harry that he has to go alone. I have to say that one thing about this scene is that when Cooper comments on the sycamore trees, they look like very young sycamore trees. Actually, it looks like those trees haven't been there for very long. They're young, they seem to be young, thin trees. And this was talked about as being an ancient site, with the trees being significant in the the identification of the location. I don't know why the trees are so little. Maybe they are stunted by the powers that exist in this area. Who knows? But so Cooper enters the Black Lodge. First of all, the design of the Black Lodge. The Black Lodge to me, it's so unique. Visually, it is an assault to the senses, I think. That chevron floor especially. Almost disorientating. The red drapes, they look very luxurious, very elegant, very indulgent. The art pieces in the Black Lodge, they seem pretty pretentious. Everything seems to be like placed to satisfy the senses on every level. I mean, this initial red room scene, it's mesmerizing. It feels like it's hypnotizing you. I think we feel, as Cooper feels, completely shocked to the core, wondering what the hell is going on. I think it's so strange that we just can't look away. I think it's amazing how much attention is given to this scene, how slowly it seems to play, but how much every second is filled with power and meaning and emotion. And obviously the lyrics of that song are meaningful in the sense that he is basically singing about their location and what that means. And I don't think it's like a welcome song to Cooper. It seems to be a bit of a show. Definitely feels like part of the act. Okay, so Harry and Andy are waiting for Cooper to re-emerge from the Black Lodge, and I think we can assume that time does not work the same in the Black Lodge, because Harry comments that they've been waiting for 10 hours for Cooper to come back. I think it's very sweet that Harry feels like he has to be there for Coop personally instead of just posting someone else on this location. Okay, so Audrey goes to the bank and chains herself to the vault. She's a different girl to the one who we met in season 1, Twin Peaks. And she's acting like a woman who knows what she wants and intends to get it by any means. I do like the comedy aspect of this dithering guy at the bank. When he walks back and forward, it's a little like that scene with the bellboy at the hotel with Cooper when he had been shot. There's a lot of humor, I think, connected to the activities of older people in Twin Peaks and their inability to get things done quickly and efficiently, and it's often made fun of within the Twin Peaks universe. We have this close attention paid to this man, and you can read that one way or another. You can laugh at it, or you can get annoyed by it. Or you can kind of find it a bit poignant that we all end up like this. And I think the slowness in this bank scene as well leads up to the last moment when the bomb explodes. It helps to build up the tension before the moment when Andrew opens the vault. The note from Thomas says, "Got you, Andrew." So he knew that Andrew would be the one that would eventually get that key. No matter who had the box. I do think that at the end of that very strange storyline between these men, that this is an appropriate way to actually end it. I do find that story very convoluted and kind of difficult to follow at times, especially when Thomas Eckhart is never really a significant character. He is like name dropped more than he is seen. You have to assume by the way the explosion is seen from the outside of that bank that it was a pretty big one, and I'm guessing that neither Andrew nor Pete would survive that. I don't know about Audrey because she was at a little distance from that bomb, but I would assume that she would be critically injured. Okay. And those glasses flying into the tree like that is just a little bit too much. So we see Bobby and Shelley discussing that they might want to get married. except the only obstacle that Shelley sees is the fact that she's already married to Leo, but she doesn't reject the idea of marriage to Bobby at all. She kind of goes with it. You know, you kind of get the feeling that they are a couple who are gonna be together for a while. So there is a feeling that everything is going back to a lot of the elements we see in the pilot episode with Heidi, the waitress, and then Sarah Palmer coming in. We haven't seen Sarah Palmer in many episodes. Sarah's being accompanied by Dr. Jacoby, so clearly she has had some mental health issues since the death of her husband and her daughter, and looks like she needs permanent care for that. I think it's very unexpected what comes out of Sarah's mouth. She speaks in a distorted voice, and she tells Major Briggs that she is in the Black Lodge with Agent Cooper. Whether this is supposed to be Annie's voice or Wyndham's voice or somebody else's voice, I'm not sure. Major Briggs reacts in a way in which he is disappointed but not surprised to get this message. So Cooper is having a very weird experience in the Red Room, to say the least. Laura Palmer appears wearing a black robe, very in keeping with what we see in the rest of the room. She makes a strange hand signal which makes her look like some kind of posed work of art. Cooper's experience plays out like a dream or a nightmare, with elements seemingly making no sense and having random associations to the next thing that happens. So we first of all see him trying to drink his coffee, which changes consistency. The little man seems to have the power to be able to change the form of the coffee, and he seems to be showing Cooper this for some reason. There is the idea that nothing is really tangible or can be taken hold of or can be counted on as reality, or very much like a dream in that sense, because in a dream you often feel like you are being led. There is nothing you can do to change events or to stop events or to alter things. So I think it's almost maddening that Cooper goes up and down this central corridor and he enters the same rooms and yet they are different every time. Okay, I find it interesting that Madeline appears, but she stands at a distance to Cooper. I've always found that a little bit odd. Looks exactly like Laura, dressed in the same dress, but she holds herself at a distance. And I also think that the things that these characters say aren't actually what people would say if they had any consciousness. These seem to be comments that your mind might pick up on if you knew the situation of Laura and Madeline and your mind was trying to make sense of the story. So we have Madeline basically coming on and saying, "Watch out for my cousin," which kind of sums up Madeline's whole appearance on Twin Peaks, because she was always in the shadow of Laura and she was always less memorable than Laura and she was always less important than Laura. Her death mattered less than Laura, it seemed like, to most people, and to the audience of Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer is still the enduring figure and the main victim of this evil. So I find it kind of appropriate that she comes on and says, "Watch out for my cousin," because that was always the role of Madeline, to refer to her cousin. Cooper enters this room where the little man, he says the term doppelganger, and he seems like the doppelganger of the original little man. The figure of Laura Palmer appears, and she also appears to be a doppelganger, and she's like throwing herself over this love seat. I think that's what you call them, with the two seats side by side like that. She looks like she's possessed. She screams in Cooper's face and he can't stand it and he has to run off. And when he leaves that room, we get a flash back to the room where the figure is still screaming, so it gives you the idea that whatever is happening here with this doppelganger of Laura, is an endless thing. It is never going to stop. She's always going to be in this horrendous state. Coop suddenly gets the feeling that he's injured, and when he looks down, he is bloodied at the waist, and he appears to lose strength as soon as he sees himself injured. He retreats to where the trail of blood leads him, and he finds an image of himself lying beside what looks like Caroline, who then turns into Annie. Annie sits up. She looks like a robot. She doesn't appear to be able to see anything. She stares into the sides of the room. It makes Dale become frantic for a moment. It returns him to that state that he was in after the death of Caroline, and it also makes him remember what he is doing here, trying to save Annie. So we see Annie appear to Dale, and she says she saw the face of the man who killed her, and we think at that point that Annie is dead. We see Wyndham appear, and then we see Annie appear elsewhere, and for a moment that looks like it's the real Annie. We see this odd thing with Wyndham. He asks for Dale's soul in return for Annie's life, and at that moment Dale sacrifices himself, and he thinks that his soul is going to be removed. Bob does not like the fact that Wyndham thinks he has the right to take this kind of power in the Black Lodge when it is not his domain. It is Bob's domain. It is the rest of the Lodge Spirit's domain. And we see Wyndham stab Cooper, and then once Bob comes into the scene, that killing scene of Dale, it seems to reverse itself, as if Bob says, no, that's not going to happen. You're not going to do that because only I can do that. Only I can take souls. I think that when Bob gets a hold of Wyndham, and Wyndham seems to be in a horrendous kind of pain, that it's a little bit similar to how Wyndham treated Leo, with Bob barking the words be quiet at Wyndham and treating him just like an animal. I'm sorry. This actual scene in the Red Room does not lose its power no matter how many times it's seen, and it is just a complete mindfuck. I mean, it is. It is just, whoa. So Bob says he's going to take Wyndham's soul, and what happens to Wyndham looks horrendous. Looks like the most painful thing a human being could ever go through. And then after Dale leaves that room, after he's given permission to leave by Bob, then we see a scurrying form in the background, a shadow, and when that shadow emerges, it seems to be the doppelganger of Dale. The figure of Leland Palmer appears, and it appears to be his doppelganger, and he makes a statement that he is innocent to Dale Cooper, and then after Dale walks away, we see his demeanor change, and it is clear that he is some kind of evil man, he is an evil being who he's attempting to confuse Cooper. And Cooper's doppelganger then appears and colludes with the doppelganger of Leland, and it appears that they both know what's going to happen, or what Cooper's doppelganger intends to do, because they laugh together, and it's like they're in agreement about what will happen next, about the dirty plot that is about to transpire. It's almost as if they were expecting Cooper, and they were expecting this to happen, and they are watching Cooper fall into a trap which they have devised. They are enjoying it. They are enjoying Cooper's suffering and confusion. We see Cooper chase his doppelganger through the rooms as if he thinks this is the only way that he will possibly get out of there. And once he is in contact with that doppelganger, the door of the lodge opens and Cooper and Annie are freed from that world. Annie has a bloodied face as if she has been injured at some point within the lodge, because she was not injured before she went in there. So we see Cooper in a room at the Great Northern recovering. He wakes up, and I think we can tell from his affectation straight away that he seems a little off. The way he speaks is slightly mechanical. Does not sound like Agent Cooper used to sound, with that tone of happiness and innocence. Cooper is in the bathroom and he takes the toothpaste tube and squeezes it out into the sink, and it's like something that a kid does. They want that sensory experience. They want to play with the tube, they want to play with the paste because it's a new feeling to them. And I kind of have thought that before about the lodge spirits. Their own sensory experience is different to the one that human beings have. So when they are inhabiting someone, maybe they experience things differently, and that's why an action like this would be more satisfying. I mean, it also signifies the idea that Cooper isn't thinking rationally anymore. Squeezing out the toothpaste is an unconscious act. There is no thinking behind it. Cooper's intelligence has been blunted. We see Bob in the mirror, so Bob seems to be inhabiting the body of Cooper. But is it actually Cooper, or is it his doppelganger? I think there are some ideas that this might be Cooper's doppelganger because of the message that Annie gave to Laura in Fire Walk With Me, where she says, my name is Annie, I've been with Laura and Dale, and the good Dale is in the lodge and he can't leave. At the end of the day, what we know has come out of that is that this figure of Dale Cooper has been taken over by a dark, evil spirit whose past intentions has been to kill and to go on killing. So I think the implications of that are clear without it being hugely important as to what the meaning of it all is. Obviously, that's an episode I love very much, and it's one that leaves its imprint on your imagination and your mind. That's it. Next time I record one of these videos, it will be for the season 3 premiere of Twin Peaks. I can't believe I'm saying that. Okay, bye.